Today, I have Dr. Brian Cohen. He's a practicing anesthesiologist and founding partner of Miami Anesthesia Services, a concierge ambulatory surgery center anesthesia company. He's also the specialty medical director for preferred anesthesia and pain management for AMS Management Group, a medical liability company. He's also chief medical officer and co founder of Adaptrack, an AI driven practice savvy nudge platform for physician teams to tackle risk blind spots and unlock efficiency opportunities. And he's chief medical officer of CMEfy and Learner Plus. Woo! That
Yeah.
is quite a list there.
It's been gathered over years.
Well, well, it's an honor to have you on the podcast, and thanks for taking time.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk with you.
Well, we like to start the podcast with asking about your doctor origin story. What brought you to medicine and what's keeping you in it now?
Yeah, what brought me to it, I don't ever remember anything else, honestly. It was one of those things where, you know, as a child, I was sort of drawn to the science aspect of it. I had some family members that were physicians, and that seemed to be my path, so much so that at least I was convinced so that I did enter one of the programs out of high school, which was one of the combined programs. So you hope that your choice was right, at the age of 18, that you wanted to end up in medicine because that was really the only path you had once you entered that program. Once I went through, anesthesia residency, I sort of found myself in this path that now I see, but I didn't know then, of trying out all those different types of practicing medicine, meaning, we all see the academic world in residency programs. And I saw, the private practice, small group, large group, employed anesthesia group, and then probably being exposed to all of those and sort of picking what I liked, what I didn't like, what I thought worked, maybe what didn't work, led me to kind of jump and make that decision when the opportunity presented itself in 2015 to start my own anesthesia company, which is Miami Anesthesia Services. So I think without that experience leading up to it and kind of being exposed to those different components of the different structures of healthcare and how we can work and what types of scenarios we can work in, I don't think I would have had the ability to really jump out and even try my own thing. And I say that making it sound like I knew what I was doing, but I had no idea what I was doing. And neither did my partner. And it was that ignorance, blissfully ignorant approach of, well, I'm sure there's like a handbook out there somewhere to tell you how to start an anesthesia company, but it turns out there's not. Just like when we have babies, there's doesn't come with that instruction guide, unfortunately. But now, 8, 9 years later, it's, the amount of information that we gained along the way, I think we do finally feel like we have a grasp on what it means to be an independent practice, how to lean on some of the strengths of that, maybe what some of the weaknesses are so that we can find the resources to support us in ways that other corporate anesthesia or academic anesthesia groups may have kind of in that back office area, and continue to do what we feel is right for us, right for the centers that we partner with, right for the employees that we have within our group. Now we have over 100 employees in our anesthesia group, and we started with the three of us. And when we sat down to take this journey, it was kind of what I said before: what's right, what's wrong, and what can we do differently? And then the trick has been just sticking to that, right? Just sticking to the mission, focusing on the culture and the people, and kind of allowing everything else to follow.
I love that story. And listening to it, I'm curious if what's keeping you in medicine now is that autonomy piece. It sounds like your group has been able to carve that out, that it's a anesthesiologist owned practice, led practice, and that you were able to set your mission and vision and you're living it, doing it every day.
the main thing that's keeping us in it. And also seeing again the people around us enjoying their days. And
Mhm.
that's not something a lot of us in medicine can see anymore. But I'll be honest, I mean, every time we hire somebody new, you know, it's they ask, well, what are my days going to be like? Where am I going to go? What type of facilities are we working at? And the answer is, you tell me. It's like, the whole approach to this is when we as physicians are happy with what we're doing, that usually means our patients are happy, our colleagues are happy, the facilities we're working at are happy, and everything else really just kind of falls into place. And so, the goal is not to put people in places in which we want. It's finding the right fits and finding what works with that. And again, that touches back on autonomy. And we're in a little bit of a unique bubble down here in Southeast Florida because this was the birthplace of almost all of the larger anesthesia, corporate anesthesia companies that have grown to, 3, 4, 5,000 providers within the groups. And that became very much of the norm down here very early on, much, much earlier than it spread throughout the rest of the country. So when we founded an independent group, it was not only was it intimidating, but and we were constantly questioning, why aren't other people doing this? Like, are we doing something wrong here? And now you started to see the shift in clinicians, physicians, surgery center facilities, hospitals, really all of the stakeholders within this, healthcare community that we work in, kind of going back and finding that value again in, I'll use the word autonomy again, but it's really that what's motivating us and where do our incentives lie? And not to get on a soapbox about the private equity world within healthcare, but that has come up in a lot of our conversations where very openly these hospitals, health systems, even down to the physician level, said, we don't like that being out there as the motivating factor. We want to bring it back to all of us really being aligned and moving in the same direction and motivated by the same things and incentivized by the same things. And I still think what we've seen now is that independent practice is actually one of the few structures that allows for that type of alignment to happen. And I don't say that in a global sense of the word, where in every situation that's the right answer. But because I think we ended up in that unique niche down here of kind of sliding in between all the larger companies, it stands out a little bit more maybe elsewhere than it would, other parts of the country. And that's really what we've stuck to.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really encouraging story. And I've heard for other reasons that anesthesia kind of went through a lot of the same issues that emergency medicine went
Mhm.
through. And perhaps anesthesia, again, is kind of in this different cycle. Are you seeing a trend towards more independent groups, or the corporate behemoths still large and in charge?
There is a shift going on. And it's funny you say that because I've always, I was sort of told early on, and then I've kind of watched that wave happen is anyone in healthcare knows that everything is cyclical in our world, right? And I don't know what it's 5-year, 10-year cycles, whatever the magic number is. I think if we knew that, we would all be retired by now because we would have ride that wave in a better way. But it's cyclical, but it's also cyclical by specialty, right? So something that happened in the anesthesia world maybe is just starting to happen in the derm and in ophtho world, and these different structures are going into place in different specialties at different times. But I think you're right. ED and anesthesia, I probably put radiology in there a little bit too, have sort of aligned with whatever our cycles are. We have seen, especially in South Florida, throughout the rest of the state and throughout some of the Southeast areas of the country specifically, a shift to move away from some of the larger corporate companies, not because of quality of care, often because of some of the lack of transparency in the dollars that are being needed in to be allocated to provide services there. And what you're seeing is a lot of these hospitals and health systems looking to take it in house. And you know, I started asking myself, well, why? Like, that's just we saw this happen before and it didn't work. So why is it going to work now? And I think a lot of what made it fail in the past was certain departments moved in-house under a hospital, but then the hospital assumed ED, anesthesia, radiology is manage the same, build the same, everything's the same as maybe a internal medicine or hospitalist or surgeon specialty. And it's not. It's unique. And there's a lot of unique factors that have to be taken into account. And what you're seeing this time is, yes, the employment may fall under the hospital now, but then independent management groups or specialty specific management groups are coming in and sort of adding that missing component that wasn't there last time. And I think, honestly, I think that's the recipe for success if the partnership, the stakeholders, the hospital, the physicians, and other supporting clinicians, and the management company are truly moving in that direction together and working as a team rather than working against each other. From a physician side, I'm interested, you may have heard similar experiences in the ED world. And in anesthesia, what we've heard for years is the safe employment was the large corporate anesthesia companies. I always have a job. I always know what my salary is. Maybe I'm not going to, hit up here, but I'll always be right here. And I'm good with that. And when a lot of these larger corporations started losing contracts at hospital systems, again, for whatever factors that were playing into it, this feeling of safety of being employed by those corporations disappeared. And to a point where if I'm an individual anesthesiologist, and let's say I am killing it, I'm great at my job, I show up enthusiastic, patients love me, the surgeons love me, I'm meeting all the quality metrics that are whatever is out there. But the guy who owns the company, 300 miles away from my hospital, sitting 15 floors up in the sky in the suit, makes a decision, I'm out of a job. And there's a huge disconnect there about my performance and what my day-to-day reality is. Now, if I'm employed by that hospital, there's a much better chance that my performance will be tied to my security. We're all very type A. We like to know what is happening, that we're secure, that, what the expectations are and how we can meet them. And that's actually part of this model now that you see. And again, where do the independent groups fit in? I think we still kind of sit in between and fill some of those gaps. But to answer your question, definitely a shift from, the large corporations back under kind of a hospital employment model.
That's great news. And, I really do think that's a silver lining that people should hold on to. There's so much bad news coming out of the healthcare world. Burnout rates are still for emergency medicine close to 70%. And I really do think we're seeing pockets, glimmers of great news. And, whatever professional organization you belong to, they're starting to provide more support. I'm most familiar with the American College of Emergency Physicians, but if there's a listener out there that wants to form a Democratic group or independent group, there are resources out there because it is scary and a lot of physicians are risk adverse. But I think what you just painted a good picture of, even though some people may not like it, is staying with some of these large companies is not completely risk free. And we saw that during the pandemic. We saw how comfortable they were when ED volumes went, rocketed down, even though it was incredibly predictable that they were going to go up. They were very happy to decrease people's pay and really make people nervous. So, wow, that was great. I want to shift gears and move into another facet of your professional identity. So you're practicing anesthesiologist, but when I read your bio, I'm getting an entrepreneurial vibe as well. So can you tell us about your roles at CMEfy and Learner Plus? What are these companies and how did you become involved?
First of all, entrepreneurial role, I hate risk. I didn't want to
Oh,
like
wait, you're
I
an
just
anesthesiologist.
I
That's
know.
right.
I know. This was not me. I had no idea that this would that I was going to find this passion. And I will say the only reason that I was able to speak with one of my anesthesia partners back in 2015, who I had never met before, We talked for about 2 hours on what the plan was to start a new company. And I walked upstairs and told my wife that I'm quitting my job that I'd been at for 8 years and starting a new company. And she said, okay, like that. And I think that's the only reason I took my first step into entrepreneurship was because she was just supportive and she's way more relaxed than I am. But I will say, once I tasted that and once I saw that we could literally sit in a room with like-minded people or people that I didn't agree with and say, okay, here are the ideas. Here's the mission. Here's the statement. Here's this path we're going to go on. It could work. It could fail. We have no idea, but let's go for it. And then all of a sudden you saw it work. Yeah, that was like, that time you go to the casino the first time and you win and you think it's going to happen every time. Great feeling, not realistic, but it opened me up to that world and I love it. And I don't think there's any opportunity or amount of money that could be put back in front of me to say, give that up and do this again. And I would go back to it. It's just, it adds that facet to my life that I've really enjoyed experimenting with and just finding ways to solve things and seeing if it works. And so once I had convinced myself that maybe I should loosen up a little bit and, and try some new things because the anesthesia thing was fun. I crossed paths with Niraj Swami, who's been my partner with all of the tech companies that we've done. He's the CEO, the engineer, the behavioral scientist, everything behind the product. We just have a working relationship that's been amazing. And that's what's fostered my ability to continue to find ways to solve problems in the health space. And what I've loved about him and working with him is his interest has always been using technology to improve human behavior in a positive
Mm.
way. And when he and I first crossed paths, he hadn't really gotten to experiment with that in healthcare yet. Yet his sister's a physician, his mom is a physician, his dad is a physician, his grandmother was an OBGYN in India, one of the first female OBGYNs in India. And so his background in healthcare is immense and he just solves problems for us. And so when he and I started working together on that, we started using some of the ideas and things he had tried in other aspects of business and entrepreneurship, but applying it into the healthcare world. And really, one of the first things we noticed was when this was back in 2018, 2019, there are so many health tech companies and there are so many products, but there were so few of them that focused on making the physician's life better. It was all about, let me use this to get patient information or to help the hospital collect, more money or to solve this or do that. So few of them were focused on making our days or lives better. And that was really the first product we set out to do was on the risk side. And then it sort of blossomed out from there with the other opportunities.
I love that story, and I feel that pain a lot that I think physicians I can't remember the last number I looked at, but we're a small group. So when you look at, other groups, nurses, even, just various allied health, we are definitely small. We have a huge value to the system. But I think when it comes to people starting businesses, sometimes the market share for physicians is small.
It is, I mentioned we started in 2018, which means we existed during the 2020, 2021 years. It was interesting to watch that shift as you mentioned, the numbers may be small, but our impact is huge. And that impact, for the first time, probably in our careers, those images of people standing out on the balcony, clapping for physicians, walking into the ERs, right? And to do the jobs in 2020, it was kind of like this snapshot in time where it was very interesting to have a product that was focused on improving physicians' lives when everybody in the world was actually appreciative of what we were doing. And we're also trying to improve our lives. Now we're in 2024 and reality has sort of set back in, but that's what drives us to keep that focus also because we saw that happen, right? And there was something special about it. And I think it definitely touched us, as physicians who were practicing at the time. And it definitely, as much negativity as that was happening around us, I think that made an impact on us continuing to go in every day and do what we were doing. So we can keep it going. We don't need people standing on balconies for us, but we can continue to find ways to help each other, to learn with each other, to make each other's lives a little bit better. We should.
Yeah. The through lines come back to, my research on change makers and organizational psychology. you know, Literature that's not specific to physicians say that in order for people to be fulfilled, they need autonomy, belonging, and competency. And so when you look throughout your career and biography, you can see those themes emerge. The emergence of a democratic or independent group, what you just talked about right now, the sense of community and caring for your colleagues. And then, I think a great segue now is let's talk about CMEfy and Learner Plus, because I think that's going to get at that competency piece, which I know, and we've had conversations before, is really important to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you just like psychoanalyzed my whole career. I'm so impressed. And I think you're right. God. So yes, when we first started with Adaptrack and found the benefit and the value of creating reward for engaging with information, with Adaptrack, that information happened to be on decreasing risk and medical liability. That reward happened to be CME credit. That showed, at least proved to us that we as physicians, continue to work towards things in which those carrots lie out there. And what we tried to focus on, as long as each stakeholder again wins, then this is something good. Meaning, if I, as a physician, can gain credit, but I'm also gaining knowledge, and the person sharing this knowledge with me is gaining engagement and also able to share his or her voice, everyone's sort of gaining something. And that's really what we built the MFI on, was this transaction of knowledge and being able to allow for a transaction of knowledge that otherwise really wasn't being documented. What I mean by that is there's a very clear in healthcare, there's a very clear definition of formal learning, structured learning, timed learning. That's like how our brains have been programmed, from the time we were probably in medical school. Here's your class hour, from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. You get into residency, go to grand rounds from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. That's worth 1 credit, right? So even moving out into practice, this has sort of followed, and there's huge value in that. And there's nothing that where that should not continue to exist. What we really started to appreciate, though, was all those moments in between, right? All those unstructured, impromptu moments that learning was still happening, but we had no way to capture those moments. We had no way to document those moments, and we had nothing to be rewarded from it. And again, not to draw too much back into that unique time period in 2020, 2021, but we were determined to find ways to reward physicians for things we were already doing, instead of saying, okay, do everything you're supposed to be doing, and here's 10 more things, right? It was, we're doing enough. Like, I'm learning all day, every day. Every patient I see, every surgeon I talk to across the drape during a case, I'm picking up something. If I can capture that and find a way to get credit for that, then that's worth something. And that was really the premise of CMEfy and how it was created. What we've evolved with over time is, again, we took a system that was fairly, in our opinion, somewhat antiquated, needed a little bit of a refresh, if you will, and pushed it a little bit each time to allow for a little bit of innovation to be brought into that space. And what has evolved from the founding of CMEfy until now, are new activities, updated accreditation and reviews and updated products that have allowed us to take that whole platform. And again, I'm going to use the word autonomy again, but push it into more of an autonomous type scenario where now literally every clinician anywhere, everywhere can hold this Learner Plus product in our hands. We decide what learning is happening, what is learning. If we are able to reflect on this learning, make meaningful connections on the platform in the form of a reflection, we generate credit on my time, on things that I find important or relevant to my practice. And it's really about taking all of these ideas and concepts and conversations and applying them to myself, to my own experience, to my own practice. Because one of the things that I found very interesting, tying this back to when we founded our anesthesia group, back in 2015, and now 9 years later, how do we as physicians gain knowledge and take action on that knowledge, and how do we apply it to our own practices? Totally different. It's totally different. And, again, I mentioned like, I thought there was going to be some playbook on starting an anesthesia group. No, there wasn't. But now there are so many conversations happening between independent practices across the country. It could be a podcast. It could be, somebody posting a blog. It could be somebody within the ASC organization that we work with nationally had an experience out in California surgery center that may be very relevant to what I'm seeing down in Miami and Fort Lauderdale surgery centers. And these bits of information that are coming from peers, colleagues, voice leaders like yourself that have the bravery to put their voice out there, I can now pick it up. And if I'm start integrating into my practice, again, it's not the next chapter of the textbook. It's not the next monthly journal. It's not even the next annual, ASA conference. This is happening 24/7 in healthcare. And it's the sharing information that we now really can find from our peers, from our colleagues. And that's what's allowing us to move at the speed of which healthcare is emerging these days. And we've leaned on that in a huge way in our own practice. And I've used Learner Plus to do it. Everybody holds their account, and we all come from different backgrounds, right? And maybe some of our CRNAs were working in Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, and they saw something happening there that they really think we should integrate into one of our Eye Institute surgery centers. And they can share that with the group, and we can all read that, reflect on it, earn credit, and essentially document our learning from it. So there's a lot of ways in which it, again, just supports both that, really all the factors that you just mentioned, and the autonomy and the learning and the independence.
So, can you make it a little bit more granular for the listeners? How I want to come back to the reflection piece, but how do they get Learner Plus?
So anyone can sign up for Learner Plus on the website, learner.plus. And there are a couple ways in which individual clinicians can and will engage with this. If they are part of larger organizations or some of our partners and champions, they may get a coupon code from those individuals and those organizations to get either a discount or a Learner Plus on their account on their behalf. If you are coming in as an individual, you can purchase a Learner Plus account for $50 per year. That gets you unlimited reflections and what translates into unlimited CME or CE credits during that year. The way you earn a credit is by the reflection, like you mentioned. Now, what I mean by that is we do not, and we have never accredited content. So we bring an accredited activity to learning moments. And if clinicians can take those learning moments and on our platform, engage with this reflective practice behavior, and there's content present on the platform that describes and teaches what reflective practice is, which is really just making those meaningful connections and reflecting on them and applying them to your practice. Our engine essentially walks those clinicians through a few prompts to allow them to reflect in and apply that knowledge forward, kind of a second tier thinking, assess those reflections and earn a credit. Again, this could take a matter of minutes. On average, you're seeing about 5 to 7 minutes, people engaging in this reflective activity, but it could come from a 3-hour lecture. It could come from a 3-minute spark. It's about that spark of learning that sort of prompts me to apply it to my practice and walk away with a credit.
Yeah, I think this is so important. And for some of the listeners that might be thinking, well, I always go to the annual conference and I always have plenty of CME. I would still encourage them to try out Learner Plus. And it's really based on the other research that I'm doing right now and all the reading I did is I wrote my book. Having a fulfilling practice in medicine comes from meaning making. And so, what you're describing a lot of is you're making meaning of moments. We've all had, a clinical case where you're like, wow, I'd never seen that before. Like, that was unique. And then trying to make meaning of that. Like, was that just a, random event or is there actually a syndrome or something that would have explained that? So, that's the type of thing that you could go into Learner Plus and reflect on. And it's going to do two things. You're going to solidify more of your own knowledge, which physicians are already highly motivated to do that. But my hypothesis, and I'm curious if you have any data to support this, is what we know from like qualitative research, helping people to have moments where you slow down and reflect can actually help with emotional regulation. And again, with this slowing down to say, that was a really hard case and that was a strange thing that happened, but I did a good job or I did the best job that I could. And I'm learning a little bit more that I think I'll be able to do this better next time.
100%. Yes. And most of the research that we had built this on really came out of the UK and a lot of the focus of the NHS and reflective practice. And reflection within healthcare is a huge part of their, what we call main ethics certification process, is a huge part over with the NHS physicians because they have found, a reflective physician is an effective physician because again, it's how we integrate that information and apply it. Right. And, one of the things I've learned to appreciate is how different every practice setting is and how that affects the relevance of what we're learning around us. So, what an ER physician in rural setting is very different than the ER in the middle of New York City. Expand that statement out across every demographic, across every setting within the US. And it's just, we all have very unique working situations, patient populations, colleagues around us, team based behaviors. All of these things are like a fingerprint of ourselves. And that's where I've seen such power in reflective practice and reflective learning. And we've leaned into that a little bit in how we can take that on an individual level and turn that back for you into your own learning transcript, essentially. So, one way that we've tried to quantitate some of this more qualitative information is by leaning on our engine to analyze both at a high level and a more granular level. What am I thinking? What am I make sense of all of this stuff that I just put down? Because if you think of it over, say that 12-month period, maybe I've left, 30 reflections. Some have been interesting cases I saw. Some have been maybe a conference I went to, whatever it may be. I'm leaving free text thoughts and I'm being prompted to pretty much say, what did I learn? And then how am I applying this? And maybe in some of these prompts are, okay, I get what you just said. Consider thinking about it from this angle. Have you ever done this or seen this? And put down your thoughts there. So it's really forcing you to sort of take it to that next level of thinking. And all those reflections live in my own personal learning journal. And at the end of the year, I can go back and say, okay, who am I right now? What am I learning? What am I focusing on? What is my sentiment around certain topics? What are the clinical keywords I'm leaning into the most? What are some of the gaps that are being analyzed from things that I'm missing that this engine is able to essentially draw out just from the free text thoughts that I've put down? And now I'm able to go back just on a personal level and say, okay, here's where I'm focused, but here's maybe where I need to kind of lean in a little bit more. You know, from an educator point of view, also, I can share this back with program directors or other individuals. that may take this again at an aggregate level and use that to sort of shape some of the educational experiences going forward based on information about what they gained from those reflections over the past. So, it really opens it up to not just putting my learning down, but also learning about myself. That's part of reflective practice. And like you said, the biggest data piece that we've pulled away with it is less so on maybe outcomes, but more on just, do we do this as physicians? Will we do this? And again, the engagement that we've seen and how it's evolved, even over the few years that we've been building these types of platforms, we've gone from averaging about 16 words for reflection to 25 words for reflection. And now we're averaging over 40 words per reflection. And that's not because we say if you leave 39 per words, you're not getting a credit. That's not how the system is built up. It's built to allow me to decide what's important to me. And when the time is right for me to sit and do this. So, maybe that lecture at noon on a Wednesday afternoon on some topic that really wasn't relevant, I could maybe write 6 words about it. If I'm finding these situations and I'm able to essentially engage when it's convenient for me and when I have the mind space to sit and do it, the engagement has been incredible. And that's the data that's really kind of blown me away, is the quality of thoughts that are coming from our peers and our colleagues, not because they have to, but because this is who we are as physicians. And this is what makes us better every day that we go see the next patient and the next patient and work with the next colleague and this and that. So that's been awesome to watch.
There's a lot of listeners that may be thinking that they're ready for something new in their career, and you certainly still do anesthesia, but you have this leadership edge of what you're doing, being a chief medical officer. What's one pearl, one book, one thing, if you can reduce it to that, that you would encourage somebody to do if they're on that fence where they're about to maybe try to leap into a bigger leadership role?
I think so much of it is about the people that you work with. I gave the example, I do work with her, but my wife, was one. You have to find that support system, number one, especially as physicians. Oftentimes we are afraid of failure. We're always thinking the what ifs. If you have that support system behind you, that becomes just a little bit less and allows you to sort of take jumps and risks. Again, focusing on the people, finding individuals like Niraj who become your partner in these things. And my anesthesia partners we are all very different in our strengths and our weaknesses. And we see that as an overall strength, right? So just finding ways in which you can complement each other. Success is not about agreeing all the time, right? It's about finding the best path forward for the overall success of the organization or whatever group that you're working in. And so if you surround yourself just with people that agree all the time, probably not the best, equation for success. We always challenge each other. We always look to do things better or different and ask the question why. I think in healthcare, there are a lot of opportunities to sort of start branching out. There's books on, there's groups that, just focus on these additional opportunities. And as a group, we're such unique thinkers. If you have an itch to do that, the world needs you doing that. So, whatever, if it's something just small for your own personal gain to give you that balance in the healthcare side of things or your practice side of things, huge value in that too, because you're going to be a hell of a lot better doctor if you're happy with the balance you have from these other aspects that you're pulling into your life as well. The physicians that I've met along the past, 5, 6, 7 years that have taken the chance to start something or join something, are every one of them is just incredible, because we all know how risk averse we are. So you sort of have this mutual respect for going out and trying that. And I think at the same time, we also then tend to support each other. And I think we as physicians need to do more of that. So, when you branch out into that entrepreneurial world, you are going to have a lot of support systems around you and lean on them. That's why we are all here doing what we're doing. I still don't even consider that we have a CME company. I don't think we consider really we're a true CME company. We're a learning company. We're a learning company that essentially encourages that exchange of knowledge and just keeps allowing us, as I said, Niraj has focused every one of his, adventures over life is to finding ways to use technology to make human behavior better. And that's what we do in healthcare every day too, right? So, I say go for it and find your crew, find your people to lean on and have fun because we have enough stress in our lives without that.
Those are great tips. It's really about, if you read HBR, your board of directors. And I think what you mentioned was very important is it really starts at home and having that bedrock of support, whatever that looks like. Not everyone has a spouse, but what are your relationships outside of healthcare that are going to endure? Because as much as you and I get a lot of meaning from our work, I am reminded, that if I don't show up, especially to a clinical shift, somebody fills it. It's not the same at
Mhm.
my house. So,
Yes,
so having those
very true.
priorities.
Very true.
Yeah. Well, as we wind down, what are you excited about in 2024? We're about halfway through the year when we're recording this, and it'll probably come out right around September, October. So, what are you looking forward to?
This year's flying by the way. My God, we are halfway through it. I think both in the healthcare side, a lot of what we talked about, I think we're seeing a certain direction in which different practice settings are being allowed to try themselves again. And I think that's a good thing for any physician to have options. And so I'm excited to see sort of how those options play out over the next 6 to 12 months. And hopefully people can find the right fits for them and that allows them to do really what they hope to be doing. I think on the tech side, I think, technology is evolving in insane paces right now with AI and things of that nature. I think I'm interested to see how that balances out with the good and the bad. And I'm excited to see, how that balances out in the good and the bad. And I think, again, partnering with somebody like Niraj, I always know where we will end up on that side of it using it in a positive manner. But I think it's going to allow us as humans to do so much more with a little bit use of technology. And I think, again, we need that right now, just because just everything that we've talked about. There's a lot on everyone's plates. I think we've all stretched ourselves fairly thin in these past few years, trying to do everything we feel like we need to do. And if we can lean in on some of these tools that are, coming through to assist us and we use it in that manner, I think I'm hoping to see some reprieve for everybody and some good comfort.
I agree. I mean, I've read Eric Topol's book, Deep Medicine, which is a great primer on AI, and I'm holding on to hope that it doesn't become. I don't think physicians can be any more productive. I think we squeezed that rock,
Yes.
and there isn't anything left to come out. And so I'm hoping the AI advances that come are not about trying to make us more productive, but about restoring the connections that we're
Mhm.
supposed to have with our patients and with our teams, and that we can truly start to have quality and trust. I mean, one of the saddest things that I think came out of the pandemic, one of the saddest, there's a lot there, but it really was a display, especially after, the first year, the distrust that a
Mhm.
lot of people have in healthcare. And I can't blame them. Because I go to primary care visits too, in which, they're 6 minutes long, and it's very hard for me to, even as a physician, trust another physician that's only interacted with me for 6 minutes. So I think that's one of the biggest dilemmas of our time is how will we use AI to do all the things that we really don't need a
Mhm.
physician to do and to bring back that quality human connection, which is the bedrock of trust. So that's my hope as we progress into this new AI era, which is not really a new AI era, but certainly the chat GPT era that's made it so in the zeitgeist right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
How can our listeners connect with you with Learner Plus?
So for information about Learner Plus, go to about.learner.plus. That's also right where they can sign up for it and get going within about 20 seconds. They can have their own account. I am on LinkedIn, probably the easiest way, or can reach out at brian@cmfi.com if anyone wants to direct message me and has interest in learning more or engaging in any way.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, and we'll have you back because we didn't even deep dive. I know you have so much expertise in AI, and I definitely want to have you back to talk about that. But I think we covered what we needed to, which was really understanding more of your journey and how it informed all the great work that you're doing. And I really appreciate what you're doing, leading an independent group and at the senior level of a company that is truly, like you said at the beginning, trying to make the working lives of physicians better.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.